My name is Laura, and I am 50 years old. For most of my life, I believed that if two people truly loved each other, they would stay together forever. But life taught me something different. Sometimes, the person who promises to stay is the same person who breaks your heart. And sometimes, forgiveness comes when you least expect it. 20 years ago, I met a man named Daniel. We met in a small bookstore. I was looking for a novel, and Daniel accidentally picked up the same book. We laughed about it. That simple moment became the beginning of our story. We started meeting for coffee, then going for walks, and eventually we fell in love. A year later, we got married. Daniel wasn't a romantic man. He rarely bought expensive gifts. He wasn't the kind of husband who wrote love letters or planned fancy dates. But he showed his love in small ways. Whenever it rained, he would remind me to take an umbrella. Whenever I was tired, he quietly did the housework. When I wanted to lose weight, he would say, "Laura, you don't need to change yourself for anyone." At the time, I didn't realize how much those little things meant. We eventually had 2 children, Alex and Ryan. Daniel was a hard-working father. He worked construction for years, saved money, and eventually started his own small business. We bought a modest house in the countryside. I stayed home and looked after the house and garden. Our children grew up. They went to college, started their own lives, and eventually got married. Then came the greatest joy of my life, my granddaughter, Sophie. She brought laughter back into our home. Daniel adored her. Whenever Sophie visited, he became like a child himself. Everything seemed perfect. Until one weekend changed everything. Our son called and said, "Mom, we're bringing Sophie to visit." I smiled and asked Daniel if he would be home. He became unusually quiet. Then he said, "I might have to stay somewhere else this weekend." His answer frightened me. I asked, "Why?" He didn't explain. The next morning, I went to his office. Daniel wasn't there. I called him several times, but he didn't answer. Then I overheard 2 people talking nearby. One of them said, "She still doesn't know." My heart started beating faster. I returned home and waited. When Daniel finally arrived, I looked directly into his eyes. I asked the question I was afraid to ask. "Daniel, is there someone else?" He was silent for several seconds. Then he said, "Yes." That one word destroyed 20 years of my life. I asked, "Are you leaving me?" He looked down. Yes. I didn't fight him. I didn't beg him. I simply watched him pack his suitcase. When the door closed behind him, I felt like the entire house had become empty. For weeks, I barely slept. I stopped taking care of myself. I didn't want to meet anyone. I couldn't understand how the man I trusted for 20 years could walk away so easily. My sons came to see me. They were angry with their father. But I told them, "Whatever happened between your father and me, he is still your father. Don't let my pain destroy your relationship with him." One afternoon, my old friend Nora came to visit. She looked at me and said, "Laura, come with me." I didn't want to go anywhere, but she insisted. She took me to a children's care center. There were sick children receiving treatment there. Some were weak. Some had lost their hair. But many of them were still smiling. I watched their mothers sitting beside them, holding their hands and encouraging them. Nora quietly said, "Laura, look at them. Their lives are difficult, but they're still fighting." Her words stayed in my mind. That day, I realized something. My marriage had ended. But my life had not ended. I started volunteering at the center. Then I began raising money for families who couldn't afford treatment. Little by little, I started feeling useful again. I smiled. I laughed. I discovered a version of myself that I had forgotten. Years passed. 10 years went by. I built a peaceful life. Then, on a cold winter evening, someone knocked on my door. I opened it. And there stood Daniel. I almost didn't recognize him. His hair was gray. His face looked tired. He seemed much older than the man who had left me. He quietly said, "Laura, can I come inside?" I didn't answer immediately. Finally, I stepped aside. He entered. Then he said something I never expected. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I lost everything. I'm sorry. I discovered later that his second marriage had failed badly. The woman he had left me for had deceived him, and their relationship eventually collapsed. But I didn't care about revenge. I cared about one question. Could I trust him again? I allowed him to stay temporarily in the guest room. That first dinner was extremely awkward. I cooked a simple meal. Daniel took one bite and said, "I missed your cooking." I looked at him and replied, "You made your choice, Daniel." He lowered his eyes. The next day, my sons arrived. When they saw their father, they were shocked. Alex asked, "Dad, why are you here?" Daniel answered, "I hurt your mother. I know that. I'm not asking anyone to forget what I did. I just want a chance to become a better man." My sons looked at me. "Mom, whatever you decide, we'll support you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I remembered all the good memories. Then I remembered the night he left. Both memories were real. I couldn't erase one just because I remembered the other. The following morning, I saw Daniel repairing the broken fence in the garden. He was older now. His movements were slower. But he kept working. I asked, "Why are you doing that?" He smiled sadly. "Because this house still feels like home." I didn't respond. A few days later, my granddaughter Sophie came to visit. When she saw Daniel, she ran toward him. "Grandpa!" Daniel hugged her tightly. For the first time in years, I saw tears in his eyes. Sophie looked at me and said, "Grandma, can Grandpa come with us to the park?" I hesitated. Then I agreed. At the park, Daniel and I sat quietly while Sophie played. After a while, he said, "Thank you for giving me even this small chance." I replied, "I haven't forgiven you yet." He nodded. "I understand." Weeks passed. Daniel continued helping around the house. He never demanded forgiveness. He never blamed me. He simply waited. One morning, I finally asked him to sit with me. I said, "Daniel, I don't know what our future will look like. But I don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying anger." His eyes filled with tears. "I don't expect you to forget." "I won't," I said. "But I can try to forgive you." He took a deep breath. "That's more than I deserve." From that day, things slowly changed. We started talking. Then we started laughing. Eventually, we became friends again. I still don't know whether we will ever become the couple we once were. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. But I learned something important. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the pain never happened. It means deciding that the pain will no longer control your life. Daniel broke my heart once. But I refused to let that heartbreak destroy the rest of my life. Today, I am still learning how to forgive. And perhaps that is enough. Because sometimes, a second chance isn't about returning to the past. Sometimes, it's about creating a better future from what remains. So tell me, if you were Laura, would you forgive Daniel? Would you allow him back into your life? Or would you choose to close that chapter forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this emotional English story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for more stories.